Go click that time to your left. Get even closer.
You want me to start all over or just,
Yeah.
okay, just from the public hearing or from the very beginning? Okay, all right. Welcome to the Town of Tallulah Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This is a public hearing and also a regular meeting, November 10th, 2021, 6 p.m. The agenda is as stated. Would someone like to approve the adoption of the agenda? Christie?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from regular meeting August the 11th, 2021, and a regular meeting and a public hearing September 29th, 2021. Would someone like to have a discussion or approve these minutes? Make a motion, second, all in favor? All right, so now we're going to the public hearing for the zoning variance of Matthew Miles for tax parcel 101A007K, lot 48, Hickory Mountain Estates. We'll first listen to Linda on the zoning report, and then we'll give Mr. Miles an opportunity to speak.
Good evening. This is an application from Matthew Miles for lot 48 on Tallulah Trail, Hickory Nut Mountain Estates. 101A007K. It's a 0.53 acre tract. Zoned R1, single family residential, currently undeveloped. It is in the village residential area, and the request is to encroach into the 35 feet setback, front setback by 17 feet and the 15 feet setback by 6 feet. To build a 6-foot front porch and a side garage, 2-car garage, 20 by 20 on the west side of the lot. The road access is Tallulah Trail. It was advertised in the newspaper in the Clay Tribune November 4th. And the sign was posted on November 4th. Tonight is our first public hearing, and there'll be another public hearing before the zoning Board of Appeals on December 9th. The applicant is requesting a variance to encroach into the front setback and the side setbacks. It's a little bit of an interesting situation. All but 2 feet of the front setback that he's requesting would actually already be authorized under section 1501.3, article 15 of the zoning ordinance, which allows, states that the setback does not apply to any lot where the average setback on the developed lots located wholly or in part within 100 feet of each side of such lot and within the same block and zoning district and fronting on the same street as such lot is less than the minimum setback required. So, in other words, if you have a developed lot within 100 feet of the side of this lot, then you would take the average. There's only one. There's one house on the west side of the subject property. So we measured that distance, and so all but 2 feet basically would be covered by what the neighboring house is. So they are 38 feet at their closest point. The house is 42 feet 6 inches at the closest point. So to add in that 6-foot porch is basically the extra 2 feet that he's asking for. We went ahead and noticed it with the whole 17 feet just to make sure everybody understood, really exactly what we were talking about to be covered. So on the side setback, it is consistent with previous variances that have been allowed on narrow lots for the construction of the garage. So the criteria that is used for variance is under section 1704 of the zoning ordinance. And that's laid out there for you. In red, that's my responses to each of those criteria. So for number one, the lot is the most narrow at the right-of-way line. There's an existing rock wall behind, existing rock wall near the back right corner of the subject home. And below the rock wall is an existing septic tank and drain field. The house cannot be set back further on the lot. It would require that Mr. Miles choose a different house plan or possibly lay it out in a different angle on the lot to include the garage, if it was even possible. The house plan is the current house plan is 46 feet, 8 inches wide, and then there's a proposed 20-foot wide 2-car garage. Property is on the downhill side of the mountain. Many property owners in Hickory Nut Mountain built prior to being annexed into the city limits and do not meet the front setbacks requirements as established by the town. Allowing the applicant to build closer to the right of way than the 35 feet would be consistent with the neighboring house. The home site sits near the end of a road with 2 platted lots and 1 undeveloped parcel beyond this home site. The proximity to the road is consistent with other houses in the neighborhood and would be consistent with other setback variances approved in the past. I don't believe that the variance would be injurious to the neighborhood or discourage the appropriate development or use of adjacent land or buildings. The immediate neighbors have been personally notified in writing of this variance. No objections have been received by my office. Unless there's an objection from the neighbors with a reasonable interest in the zoning variance, I do not see the petition as unreasonable and do not believe it will negatively affect the surrounding values. The existing rock wall and septic system were not the result of the applicant's actions. Placement of a home in the available space is very limited. The only action of the applicant was choosing a house plan and placement of the house within the limited space available. The variance request is reasonable and that no garage could be included in the plan without a variance, causing all vehicles to be parked in the driveway, leaving less area for maneuvering without backing into the roadway. The one caveat to that is that there could be a 1-car garage within the existing setback, but there could not be a 2-car garage without the variance. And the variance would be for the building of a single-family home, which is consistent with the zoning district. So the recommendation based on Section 1501.3 of the zoning ordinance, which allows for the for you to basically match your neighbor, along with the like I said, the need for the 2 additional feet on the front setback, based on that 1501.3 caveat to the setback requirements. And the fact that the proximity to the road is consistent with other homes in the neighborhood, then I would recommend the approval of the front setback variance. And on the side setback variance, the applicant desires to build a 2-car garage on the west side of the home. The garage would encroach into the side setback by 6 feet. A 1-car could be accommodated on the lot without the variance. However, the applicant would prefer 2-car if possible. The neighbor's driveway would separate that home from the garage, as well as the additional, setback that would be there of the 9 feet. Based on the application as presented, I would recommend approval of the side setback encroachment unless there's a reasonable objection from the neighboring property owner. And then lastly, approval of variance shall be valid for 6 months unless the established use is made during that time. Mr. Miles is here to present. So introduce him. If you want to come up.
I don't know if I'm supposed to come up. to the podium or to the
Yes, sir.
chair. I don't know what to say. I think she covered everything. I'm Matt Miles. I work down the street at the hospital. And been looking for a while for a house, and I've checked quite a few subdivisions and resales and things like that. And actually, Dr. Sanders owns a lot up here. He tried to sell me his lot. And one day I just drove up to the top and I saw the lot and I'm like, holy cow. So I just kind of fell in love with this place. And then it's been a long process. I actually started this process in February. And it's been from mortgages to septic tank that was there that no one knew anything about. No one even, and it rained and had no clue. And I thought I was the manufacturer that was doing that. So, but anyways, she's painted a better picture than I could think. As far as explaining it and where I want to be and what I want to do. So I don't know if you have any questions you can ask me. I'll try to answer the best I can. But this building process is all brand new to me. So I've always bought resale, houses and things like that. I have no clue. I mean, with verbiage. When she first sent me the variance thing, I was like, but that's kind of where I'm at. And, long term, I'm looking forward to two little falls, but, I guess that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer them the best I can. Obviously, if I have complicated questions, I go to my building.
Okay, now that Mr. Miles has made his presentation, does anyone on the board have any questions? Okay, because this is a public hearing, we will ask anyone from the audience that is in favor of this variance request. Limited 10 minutes per person to speak. If anyone would like to come to the podium and speak in favor of Mr. Miles. Okay.
Hi. David Hart, 96350 Nut Mountain Road. Yeah, I kind of agree with the report that Linda has submitted. It seems like this is a reasonable request based on the geographic nature of that lot and whatnot. So I'm in favor of granting the request. I don't think it would. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just for the record, I want to say that I approve this variance. It seems reasonable. So,
Would you please state your name?
Mary Beth Hughes, sorry, 455 River Street.
Thank you. Anyone else in favor? That would like to speak?
My name is Keith Knudsen. I'm a longtime resident and also a home builder. And I see no reason why he can't be granted this permit.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, so now we will ask if there's anyone opposing this variance to speak before this board.
And one, let me make
Oh,
sure
okay.
there was no one. Did anyone on Zoom want to speak in favor of the variance?
Okay, all right, at this time, anyone that would be opposing this variance request would like to speak before this board?
Anyone on Zoom that wants to speak in opposition to the variance?
So that conducts the public hearing of the variance request from Matthew Miles, 48 Hickory Nut Mountain. At this time, we will go into a regular meeting. So we'll be closing the public hearing. Don't need to take a vote to close the public hearing.
You can.
All right, so we will be closing this public hearing and going into a regular meeting of the planning and zoning. So the fifth item on the agenda is old business, and at this time there is none.
No question about that.
Okay.
We submitted the tree ordinance to the council. Therefore, I don't remember exactly. So what's the status of that?
It'll go to the next meeting.
The city council is gonna have a workshop. It's not been scheduled yet. I just got the minutes approved for that meeting, so those changes have got to be incorporated into the draft that was submitted to them. So those changes will be made, and then at some point, the mayor will schedule the work session.
Or do we, the zoning, do we get, are we involved in that?
And you can come to the workshop
We can't come to the workshop,
and be public.
and you don't know, and you don't.
We don't have a date yet.
So it won't be at the next council meeting?
It won't be at a council meeting. It'll be a separate work
Oh,
session.
it'll be a workshop. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is new business. This is where we'll speak about the zoning variance for Matthew Miles. If the council or if the board would like to speak amongst each other.
The only
Questions?
thing that I wanted to mention is the house that we're talking about that's in Happiton County,
It's ready.
is Raven?
I guess my only comment would be, did you have the floor plan to your house when you bought that lot and realized you needed a variance, or did that just happen?
Yeah, good question. I bought the floor plan, and then with my builder, who's a Raven County builder, he looked at the variances and thought they were Raven County variances. And then he looked at Tallulah and found out they were different, something like that. That make sense? And he said that the setbacks were more in Tallulah Falls than they were in Raven. So that's where he got stuck with the front porch. I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of, like I said, this is one of the ones for me that I remember looking at the front and we were fine, but then you went to Tallulah and he said that they are a deeper setback.
Anyone else on this board like to make a statement? With no objections, I think this is a good idea, and I think it's within range to grant this variance if everyone agrees. So would someone like to make a motion to? Well, this will just be the first public hearing. There'll be a second public hearing.
This is
right?
your recommendation to the council.
Okay, all right. So for this board to make a recommendation to the city council, would anyone like to make that motion in favor of this variance request? Okay. And second? All right, all in favor? Motion passed that we will make a recommendation to the city council for your variance request.
So there'll be the second public hearing December 9th. So you'll do the same process before the city council, which serves as the board of zoning appeals.
Just for my knowledge, if they approve it too, you can start the next day. Okay. Sure how that works. No, after the after the second public hearing, I didn't know how long we had to wait to start after that.
That was going on in my mind. Glad you mentioned that.
And they do have a permit for the house because the house met the requirements. It's just those extra pieces that were not authorized yet.
All right, the next item on the agenda for the new business is to review the proposed city-initiated changes to the zoning ordinance text and authorization advertised public hearing.
And the mayor is here to
Answer questions.
to introduce those to you.
Question answers. So. So as we all know, our ordinances need some work. We run into little problems every once in a while. And so we're attempting to get some of those changed and set forth, and we have to follow the same procedure anybody else does as a town. So that keeps us accountable to everybody. So that's why we're making this application. We spoke to the council at the last council meeting. They all agreed. We made a few changes to what I initially proposed. One is to go back to the land disturbing ordinance, and in your packet, you'll have a copy of this. I spoke with Travis, and we are going to ask. I did speak with Travis, and he misunderstood when he said that we would have to create an ordinance. He thought we were wanting to be an issuing authority for land disturbing permits, and we do not. What happened was in '89, we became an issuing authority. We adopted a variant ordinance and had some other land disturbing language in the zoning section as well. In '99 or 2000, I can't remember which one, we rescinded our right to become, or to be a issuing authority for land disturbing permits, because the state had come up with their own system and initiated the blue card, is what a lot of people refer to it as. So the town decided at that point, we didn't need to be an issuing authority. We wanted to get out of that game, not mess with it, let the state handle all of it. So that's what this section, item 1 on your list, would take care of. It would put us, we never did away with those ordinances. It's caused a bit of confusion. We've had people come in and get permits that probably didn't need to get permits. And that's why we need to straighten this out. We need to fix this. So this is how we would do that. We repeal the original ordinance. We would change wording in sections 512 and 2000 and to 2003 to read like the highlighted sections here, that basically said the state will maintain and oversee any land disturbing activities in town. And that someone that wants to do land disturbing activity that meets the requirements by the state needs to bring that permit to zoning administrator. Then we run into little problems with some setbacks. We realized that as we go up from residential to highway business, we want to become less and less restrictive to the property owners. But it was backward between business district and highway business. And the original setback on the street side for highway business was 30 feet from public highways and 30 feet from other streets. And then 15 feet from the sides, whereas business district was 15 feet from streets and 5 feet from rear and 0 from sides. And that was backwards. That should have been either more restrictive, or the highways should have been less restrictive. So what we're proposing is to change highway business district to be 15 feet from public highways, 15 feet from other streets, just like business district, and then reduce the rear and side setbacks to 1 foot or 0 feet or something. So that's kind of where we want to, there may be some discussion on that, those last 2 items. In the process, our zoning administrator mentioned, Linda mentioned that, and she's absolutely right, most of the houses in this town probably don't meet our 35-foot setback. Picking up especially, my house, I don't think would. Mine was built in '64 before we had zoning in this town at all. So Linda said it would probably ease her burden if we were to move that setback to about 20 feet or 25 feet. We talked about it. The Hickory Nut Mountain setbacks were 20 feet, so we decided we just list that from other streets. And that's how we came up with those numbers. And finally, we have an amendment to section 1911. This was without this section that says from the date of public hearing. There's some uncertainty as to when y'all need to be making your recommendations to town council. I think the last amendment that was proposed, you guys only really have 1 day to make your recommendation to the town council, because we were interpreting it from the day of the application. It really ought to be from the date of the first public hearing. That way they can make their application, you guys can get a review in, you have your public hearing, and then 30 days later, you make the recommendation to the council, and that gives you more time to review before you make your recommendation if you need to. Like for tonight, you probably do it, something that's like this, you can probably do that same night, but you would have it for 30 days to make these changes. So this is what the council asked me to bring to you guys, for y'all just begin the process with. This is essentially what we discussed and they agreed to. And we made changes according to their input before we bring it to you guys. So this is our official application to change the wording on these ordinances. And then you guys will now choose when you want to set your public hearing and begin that process. So this is not the public hearing on these items tonight. So any questions?
Yeah. On the street setbacks, normally I'm used to setbacks being set from the center of the road. And the reason for that is if the road ever changes, the setback never changes. In other words, if they widen the road or change the road in any way to go from the center of the road, it's a constant.
Right.
That's something that I'm used to, but I was surprised that we go from edge of roads that.
It's not edge of road. It's from your property line. It's 20 feet from your, or 35 feet from your property line, or 15 feet from your property line.
Okay, I was reading the road.
But if you can't establish where the right of way line is, then you go 10 feet off the edge of the road.
Yeah.
That's what it's.
Yeah, we've got on Hickory Nut Mountain, we've got a 40-foot right of way, 20 feet from the center line on each side roughly, because the road might not be dead center up through there. There should be stakes, but then up at the top, Tallulah View and Tallulah Heights or whatever it is, the top of where our variance is being granted or being reviewed is a 30-foot right of way. So it's 15 feet off the center line up there. So we, Gorge View is a 40-foot right of way, but Main Street is a 0-foot right of way. You do go from the edge of pavement. So it just depends on where your property line is. We got some others where the property line's right in the middle of the road. And we have these ones. So if you'll read at the top of that chart, it says from your property, setbacks from property lines and is that 10 foot, is that in part of our ordinance? We have that written up. So if there's a discrepancy or you can't find those stakes or they were never set, then you go in our case. Now, one of the things that we intend to do, and I've talked with our attorney about, is maybe next year we'll begin, maybe I'll talk to council about beginning the process of actually doing a complete renovation of our zoning ordinances and try to hit all these things at once instead of this little piecemeal. But right now, these are some things that came up there, important fence issue, and some others. So we want to be able to hit these now, but I think we probably need to go hit this thing wholesale and just really go through the whole process, get you guys involved, maybe even hire a professional attorney to help you guys work through a lot of this and straighten a lot of zoning ordinances out. So for right now, we want to focus on these, with some more flexibility.
Thank you. Would someone like to make a date for the public hearing on these ordinance changes? Want to do it in would December be too busy or? I mean.
We did it before the December 10th one. Y'all could throw the second one in with that too. Knock it out.
Yeah, it's just,
You'll have to, what's their advertising requirements?
I've got to have at least 15 days from the date the paper comes out, so
But not more than 45 days
Not
before,
more than
before the councils.
before the council. Yeah, P and Z could have it before, 15 days, but the council has to be within 15.
so our next regular scheduled meeting is. Okay, so do you want to advertise prior
No,
to?
ours is right.
Yeah, I was gonna say council's in.
Is there a minimum of how many days it has to be between our two public hearings? or Matt?
No, that's one of the things that you, that we're, looking at changing is the 30 days. I mean, if you needed 30 days to make a recommendation, obviously, we wouldn't normally want to schedule them back to back, in case you needed that time, to do it. Kind of depends on what it is and how much.
I mean, I think this is pretty.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I see us getting a lot of
Yeah.
public.
But when you're easing restrictions rather than making them harder.
Yeah.
Less opposition.
Well, and the Hickory Nut covenants, that the original covenants are the same as these, the recommended changes. They match that 15-20.
Yeah, that's what we ended up pulling from, actually. So.
Council wanted to go, they figured that was the least restrictive. Just bring everybody in line with that.
So do we want to advertise this, the next public hearing for December the 8th? Someone like to make that motion? Get a second? All in favor? You good with that?
Understand this. Honestly,
But this is just, they're making the recommendations to fit better with what the town streets are. So not every street in town is 30 foot, or not every street.
I got that.
Okay, from the setback of their property line, this is gonna ease up some of those restrictions.
Well, my question is, if you're gonna redo the zoning, unless this is just critical, why wouldn't you wait and do it all at one time?
Because we have people currently actively wanting to do things on their property that this would help our zoning administrator not to have to bring variances in all the time. And those are expensive. We have to advertise the variances, we have to go through the two public hearings. But if we can do these now, just take care of these things, then these seem to be a little more critical than some of the other changes that need to take place.
So this came about because of the person. I forgot his
Well, we
name.
needed to change that way before. That just needed to be changed because our ordinance didn't match what we were actually doing. And we had already decided that. They just changed up the last couple. We never had the public hearing to officially change it again.
Yes, go fire.
Thank you.
But yeah, we had already met on that and we had already,
I mean, these look about normal,
Yeah.
normal for any setbacks, especially since it's not the right of way from the center of the line, it's the property line.
and the rest of the town was more restrictive than what Hickory Nut was originally. They brought it to match what Hickory Nut's covenant said in 1985. The rest of the town matched what.
So it's a setback from the middle of the road or from
No.
the pavement?
That's what I was
From
asking.
their property
It's
line.
it's from their property line.
Well, your property line is probably, I would believe, 10 feet at least off of the road.
See,
Edge
this
of
is the
road.
changes.
So
This is the
in
original.
most cases, that's gonna push your house 45 feet off the road.
A lot of people can't
And on
Yeah.
Hickory Nut Mountain in particular,
even.
there's no way.
So it's 10 feet from the pavement.
No,
No,
Your
from
property.
property line.
the pavement is the road and then they own the right of way beside it and then there's your property line.
Right, that's what I'm
But
saying.
your property line is probably around 10 feet.
That's what I'm
from that.
asking. So the property line is the pavement 10 feet.
So if you had a road and you got a 20-foot right of way, you got 10 foot here and 10 foot here, and your property line is right here, then you would now have a 20-foot setback versus a 35-foot setback. It's right now 35 is what it is, and we're asking to change it to a 20. So it doesn't come from here, 20, it comes from your property line. But like he said, there's people with property lines that's in the middle of the road, so it's from your property line, your setback.
Is this for any particular person or is it?
No, for the last 2, maybe 3 people that have built on Hickory Nut Mountain have either had to use that caveat saying you can be the same distance as your neighbor, or they've had to come, before council and P and Z for a variance. So we're doing it on every single one.
So that's like Mr. Miles, his neighbor is already within that same setback that Mr. Miles was asking for. That because his house was built previously, he's already within that. So we could, but we really couldn't make a recommendation against it when there's others already within that setback. I mean, I know rules are to be in place, but this is just a variance request. And it's not a hardship, but it could be. I mean, it could be the quality of his home, the value of his home in the future.
Would we do it all at one time and have the same variance?
Because then maybe 5 more houses that are gonna be built before we get to doing the.
It's
whole
gonna
thing.
take a long
Yeah,
time
that's
to
a big
codify
process. I mean,
codify the ordinances as a whole. I've been through that before, and it's took over a year.
It's taking that long on the tree ordinance.
So you know what we're talking about.
People just keep putting it aside. It started in January. And we're still working on it.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table with a vote for or against. And it's up to you. You don't have to. All right, well, we'll say the motion passed with 4 votes. All right, so we will make that recommendation to the city council for the December 8th public hearing for the recommendations of those ordinance changes. All right, and then the next item on the agenda is open floor discussion. Anybody have anything they want to talk about? Come on, you guys.
Anybody online?
Well, I have a question. If you're opening, do I have to stand up here and?
You don't have to, but we'd like for you to, just so we can hear you.
David Hart, 963 Hickory Nut Mountain Road. I don't get why it's not the center of the road. I don't understand
Good
that.
question.
That's the city right away.
So what? What does the right of way have to do with the setback?
Well, you
If,
want
know,
the,
if you're in the center of the road, you know where that is. You're not at the edge of the road. There's no interpretation. I mean, I don't understand. It's all measurement of feet and things like that. So I understand that if it's the property line and you know where the property line is, that's pretty good. But if you don't know where, didn't you say, Linda, if you don't know where the property line is, then it's the edge of the road? Well, the edge of the road can change.
Well, it's 10 feet from the edge of the road.
Okay, well, but still, my comment is, the edge of the road is not a set place. It can change, whereas the center of the road, you're never gonna change.
well, let me see if I can explain it like this.
I don't
The
get it.
city right away, if the city decided to go in and build a sidewalk all the way up, I'm just gonna say Hickory Nut Mountain. I know it's not possible, but if they did, then the city has a right of way.
I
And
understand
that's
that.
not encroaching on that person's property.
I totally agree. What's
Okay.
that got to do with setback?
I got that.
Well, the
Nothing.
setback is from your property, not the city's right of way.
Well, the point is that a lot of the times they incorporate all that into the setback. In other words, we're changing the distance of the setback. And what I'm saying is if you left the setback as it was and went to the center of the road, it would pretty much close to accomplish the same thing.
It'd be the same
You know what I
difference.
mean?
Mhm.
But that's the point that everybody's trying to make, and all they're talking about is it's a constant for the road, and it allows those roads to move. It allows the setbacks to stay constant because they're going from the center of the road. And if the easement changed from 10 foot to 8 foot, it wouldn't matter, because it's always that center of the road. That was the only point that everybody was making,
Mhm.
of rather than changing that distance to a shorter distance and going from property lines, you would go from the center of the road and pretty much keep it the same, and then that would incorporate that, but it's an argument for another day. I know starts to get complicated, But maybe when we start to talk about changing all these things, we could discuss it later, I don't know. But I think right now, what we're trying to do is fix a central problem that they're having right now. So that for 4 or 5 houses going on, we don't have to keep making these little variances for the short future.
Well, with the roads also having different right-of-way width. I mean, like he said, it could be 30, it could be 60, it could be 40. That could cause you or your neighbor to have a different setback if you don't go from your property line.
Don't understand what you just said, Sue.
Okay.
But
I like to draw pictures.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you going for it.
Well, and the road also curves within the right of way.
Yeah, so,
So
sorry, I know what I'm saying, but I don't know that everybody else can follow.
Well,
But she's right, if you've got a 40-foot right of way, your road is not probably in the middle of it because we have curvy roads, so it's gonna hug one side or the other. So if you're doing it from center line of road, that may leave this person with a kind of a short setback and this person with a really long one.
That's what I meant.
Okay. You're gonna have to diagram it out, I don't get it.
Okay.
I got
Because you
feet
can't-
or
you
feet
can't build
and
on the
they're
right.
netted in the same place. I
Regardless
don't
of where
get it.
the road is.
Well,
All I'm saying is,
it's just
is
according to
that
what street we're on,
in the projects
And
that
it-
I've built in Woodbury,
because every street has a
That's
different,
where we
well,
go.
not every one of them, but they could
and the
have
roads, when I
a
was doing
different
that,
right of way.
they run
So,
and run
Say
and
the
run.
city has,
And when we
this,
measured setbacks, they always.
and it's
went to
40
center
foot here,
of
but it's 60 foot
the-
here,
But
well, your neighbor
This
down
is the first
here
time I've actually seen.
may
it
be
properly.
shortened on their back setback. Because the road is over 40 foot. It would be a perfect world if every city street was 18 foot or 24 foot. And not 30, 40, 50,
Like River
60.
Street would have could build closer if we did by the center than Hickory, not necessarily, because it's a smaller.
Okay.
Reverse of that, yeah, further, it'd be further back.
The
if we did it by the
setback of the
center.
right of way or. Whatever. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine, Mr. Hart, you're fine. That's the only way we know is if we talk about. All right, so that seems to be it. Someone would like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Right. Second, all in favor? It's gonna bother me if